Okay, everybody, welcome to the August meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody out. It's the last meeting before our big Utah ATV Make-A-Wish ride. We've got the mechanic from the Edge, Dave. I'm going to turn some time over to him to let him answer some questions about repairing your machine to make sure that we can run down the trail and everybody's safe and comfortable. At this point, we're going to run through some questions, some tech stuff, and then after David's done, then we're going to run some club business, and then we're going to convene for the evening. But right now, I'd like to welcome David. He's the mechanic here at the Edge. If you have any questions for him, he's going to answer all your questions.
All right, good evening, guys. I got a list of a few questions here, and then we'll open it up to see if there's any other questions you have. First question is, how often should you be checking your belt and clutches on your machine? You want to be looking at that about every 1,000 miles. So just an inspection every 1,000 miles. Make sure everything's looking good in there. The next question is, if your machine says you can run 8 to 12 psi in your tires, is 10 a good middle ground for just a general riding for most terrain? And the answer would be yes. 10 is a great middle ground. It'll be a great pressure for 90% of the riding you're doing. With that, make sure you're running all 4 tires at the same pressure. You don't want the left side at 8 and the right side at 12. You'll definitely be feeling that on the trail. Next question is, what is a normal oil change interval in miles? I did a little bit of looking up. The Prowler Pros that we have suggest you do an oil change every 2,000 miles. That's our more utility side-by-side from Arctic Cat. The Sport side-by-side from Arctic Cat, the Double X, says you should be changing your oil about every 1,600 miles. So depending on what machine you have, around 1,500 to 2,000 miles is a good interval to be changing your oil and oil filter. Yeah, so if you're doing more technical, more harder riding, fast pace, or rock climbing, you're definitely going to want to change your oil a little sooner. Hot weather, high temps, you're going to want to change it sooner as well. Probably drop that down to every 1,000 to 1,500 miles. If you're not running your machine quite as hard, you can get away with closer to that 2,000 mile mark. Yeah, so I definitely haven't heard much of bad oils that you just shouldn't straight run in your machines. Make sure it's a power sport oil. You can't be using car oil in your power sports. They don't mix. I personally, for the side-by-sides and four-wheelers we service here, I really like the X-Star Suzuki oil. It's a 10W40 weight oil. Haven't had any issues with that one. AMSOIL, also a great oil. Yeah, you can get that in full synthetic. Depending on how you're riding, if you're just trail riding, forest roads, easy going, I don't think it's quite worth the investment to do full synthetic, but if you are really pushing the limits of your machine, that full synthetic's a good way to go. Next, you have what's a good interval for changing your air filter. You want to be checking that at minimum every 300 miles. And more in the summer, in the dry, when it's dusty, you want to be checking that almost every ride. Changing it, not necessarily, but just kind of playing it by ear. In the winter or in the wet, when there's not so much dust in the air, you can get away with a lot more time on a single filter. It's always good if you're doing a longer ride or a multiple day ride to have an extra filter with you.
I'll put something in. We get a lot of machines that'll come in and people say it's not running good, and the mechanics will open the air box and sand will pour out on the Durant jet. That's why Dave's saying you gotta be checking it after every ride. It's cheaper to change an air filter than replace your motor.
Yeah, exactly. Like Randy said, the biggest thing you can do to maintain your engine and your machine is keep that air filter clean. As soon as that starts sucking dust, you're going to have big issues on your hands.
I'm sorry to back you up, but I have a KRX and talk about the oil. People online are talking about using T6 and something about the wet clutch. Is T6 a good oil? It's a Rotella full synthetic diesel oil, basically.
So I'm not too familiar with that. But if you do have a wet clutch, you will want to make sure that's compatible. If you're running some power sport oils aren't compatible with the wet clutch, and that's going to cause slipping issues. Another question we have is an interval for greasing your wheel bearings. The grand majority of machines now don't have greasable wheel bearings. They're just sealed wheel bearings. They're non-serviceable. So if you do have greasable wheel bearings, you're probably looking about every 1,000 miles to get some fresh grease in there. Should you put your side-by-side on a battery tender? Yes. My personal rule of thumb is if the machine's going to sit for more than 2 months, I'd put a tender on it. If you're riding your machine every week, every couple weeks, even once a month, going on a good couple-hour ride, the need for a tender isn't quite there. But if you're going to be letting it sit all winter, depending on weather and whatnot, it's always good to have a tender on your machine. The next question is, what interval should you be having your machine tuned up? So I put on here every 3,000 miles. That's my personal preference for a good tune-up. Going back to the oil change, we said about every 1,500 miles. The difference between an oil change and a tune-up. Tune-up, again, you're even going back a little farther, you're going to be looking at your clutches, looking at your belt, checking your tire condition, tire pressures. You're checking wheel bearings, A-arm bearings. Again, your air filter would be checked at that time. So just a deeper dive into all these things, axles, diff oils, about every 3,000 miles. For good casual riding, probably drop that down to 2,000 to 2,500 miles if you're pushing your machine. Spark plugs, yeah, also in that 3,000 range. Machines nowadays, depending on what fuel you're running, can run a spark plug for a pretty good long time. So 3,000, 5,000 miles for spark plugs, you're not going to miss a beat. Next question is, what's the best fuel to run in your machine? Again, I looked on the owner's manuals for our Prowler, our utility side-by-side, and also our sport side-by-side. They both want you running at least 87 octane fuel from the pump. If you have a carbureted unit, that ethanol-free, the 88 Clear from Maverick is by far the best fuel you can be running. It's also good for fuel-injected machines. Just there's not as big a noticeable difference between like your 91 and your ethanol free for a fuel injected machine. With that, when you run your ethanol free, it's not going to gum up your fuel system when your unit sits for a few months or over the winter. It's going to keep that a lot cleaner and give you a lot less hassle down the road. And then the last question I have on my list is how often should I service my suspension? Suspension is definitely something very overlooked, a lot of times forgot about. On some older machines, some suspension isn't even serviceable, but we're definitely coming to where it is more serviceable. You'd want to service that suspension also about every 3,000 miles, so back in that tune-up. Probably put some fresh oil in there, recharge it with nitrogen, fresh nitrogen. We can do that here for most shops, yes. At the bare minimum, we can charge the shop with nitrogen. We can do that for just about any shop. Your suspension will settle after time. That's also something you want to check. More often than not, your owner's manual will give you a stock ride height, how high your unit should be off the ground. If you're running a bunch of cargo boxes, gasoline, anything of that manner, you're going to want to adjust your suspension from stock. If you have a handful of aftermarkets on there, strapped on there, ratcheted on there, glued on there, whatever you want to do, you're going to want to adjust that suspension for the springs to be a little stiffer and to get that back up to the stock ride height. All right, that's all the questions and answers I have on my sheet. Are there any other questions? Yeah. Valves. I just go off your owner's manual on that one. The brand new 2-liter Polaris Razor, they advertise that you can go 10,000 miles without checking the valves. So there's going to be a large fluctuation between machine for checking your valves. A rule of thumb, you're probably looking every 5,000 miles. Probably a good easy number to have in your head. Fuel stabilizer, that's also a good way to go. Ethanol free is probably ideal. But yeah, if you are in a pinch, you put just normal pump gas in, and then the unit's going to be sitting for a while, run some fuel stabilizer through it for a few minutes, that'd be great. No, there's nothing wrong. The ethanol free will help your machine last a little longer. If you have a carbureted machine and you're running regular fuel, not the ethanol free, but you're running it through your machine, you're not going to run into many issues now.
I think the big issue we see is when they sit for long periods of time. After that 30 days, the gas starts to separate. And you guys bring the car to look like brown sugar in there. Yeah, so, and people get mad at us because they say, I just paid you to clean our carburetor. And I said, when did you do that? Well, 6 months ago. Have you written it since then? Well, no, I haven't. Well, you're going to keep paying us to keep cleaning it if you don't take care of it.
If you are running normal gas as well and the unit's going to sit for a while, on all carburetors there's a little drain bolt at the bottom, so you can just drain it out so that carb's sitting empty while it's sitting.
Gear, or pick out a locking bolt, whatever, I'm not sure. So I took it to the dealer,
The first thing that comes to mind, I have seen a little bit of chatter. That's more in high gear at low speeds. Have you noticed if that's the same chatter?
It's pretty much always been in low range under basically heavy low as if you have miner going up a fairly steep hill.
I can't say that I am too familiar with that issue. If you're running a wet clutch, you did say your machine's pretty much brand new, so I wouldn't think your wet clutch is worn out. That could be something to check. That would be a little farther digging into than maybe what the text did before. Yeah, can't give you a super solid one on that. Yeah, how often should you be looking at your belt and servicing your clutches? Under hard riding, I'd be checking your belt every 500 miles. And under leisure riding, I'd be checking it around every 1,000 to 1,500. Yeah, to service your clutches, they really get this fine dust build up on them. The majority of that dust is just belt coming off the belt. It turns into a dust and can get all in your clutches. You take some compressed air, preferably have the mask on because that dust goes everywhere. It's super fine. So just take a compressed air gun and blow through your primary and secondary clutch. You can take them off the machine and do it that way, but you can get the majority of that dust out of them with them still on the machine. Yeah, if you're having slipping issues, definitely look at the belt. If you're having slipping issues, more than likely, even if the belt isn't the main cause, it's something you'll want to replace with also Scotch-Briting the faces of the clutch. If you are Scotch-Briting your clutches, you want to go from the outside of the clutch to the inside, and don't go with the clutch. Don't go in a circle with the clutch. You'll want to go take degrees out of the clutch. That surfaces the clutch against the belt so it can just grab a little better. Make sure you don't have oily hands or anything like that. Any kind of oil on your clutch face will cause slipping issues as well. Brake cleaner is really good for cleaning the face of your clutches after Scotch-Briting them. Yeah, disc brake pads, you're going to want to be looking at them about every 1,000 miles. Most brake pads will last you quite a long time. About the time the pad gets half the thickness of the metal piece it's connected to, that's when you want to start looking at replacing your pads. Yeah, coolant in your cooling system. Something to account for. You don't ever want to be mixing your coolants. If you mix coolants, they can gel and clog your cooling system. There are special coolants for power sports. You do not want to be running automotive coolant in your cooling system. Stock or OEM coolant is always a safe way to go. Again, the Suzuki X-Star coolant I really like. The Coolanol is also another brand I like. Correct. We sell both of those brands here. We sell a couple more. there are higher performance coolant that you'd probably want to stay away from. Just something to be aware of and check. Below freezing, these high temp coolants can freeze. So if your machine is not kept inside, it can then freeze your coolant and you're gonna have issues as well. So don't be using your super fancy bullet bike coolant, race performance coolant. To replace, yeah.
When you talk about, valve systems, most of these, machines have adjustable valves, is that what you adjust the valves for a certain clearance?
Yeah, so all these machines are gonna have some type of adjustment. Some have tappets, which is just a screw and a bolt that tightens down. Like my example earlier, the 2-liter Polaris Razor, it has shim under bucket, so you do have to go in there farther, remove the cams, pull the buckets, put a different size shim in, and then put it all back together and check it again. We do for the brands we carry.
What are some signs in the valve that have issues?
Yeah, so first the coolant flush, distilled water. You'll want to drain your coolant. Most units will have a specific bolt you can take off to drain the coolant out of your system. Then you'll go from the top of the radiator, fill your machine with distilled water, run that through, get the machine up to temp, drain all that water, let it cool down first, because it's all going to be pressurized in there. Let the machine cool down, take all that distilled water out. Depending on how clear or non-clear the water is, you'll want to do that a second time, distilled water, heat it up, let it cool down, drain it all out, and then you can put your fresh coolant in there. That's a great thing to do if you don't know what coolant is in your machine. So you just flush it all out and put something in there that you know you're going to be running all the time. If also on the trail, if you don't know what coolant you're running or don't have extra of the coolant you're running, bring distilled water. You just top your radiator off with distilled water, and that's not going to damage anything. That'll make sure your unit's running properly. Randy mentioned signs of valves being out of spec. You're going to hear a lot of chatter or ticking from the top end of your motor. That's the main sign of valves being out of spec, or too loose, I should say. If they're too tight, your machine's going to have a really hard time starting. Your valves aren't closing all the way, so your machine can't build the compression it needs to fire up and run. So if you have a hard time starting your machine, and then once it finally fires up and goes, it stays running for you, and that can also be a sign of tight valves, and you need a valve adjustment.
Is there a recommended coolant, like 3 years, 5 years, or?
I'd say every 3 years. Yeah, your owner's manual will say that's another one that can vary, but 3 years is good. Coolant lasts a good while. So again, if you're running your machine really hard, that's something you'll want to do more frequently. So every year, 2 years, if you're running your machine real hard.
You really have a base of that, on the oil, how long can the oil be sitting in the machine without starting, and if it's starting every week?
How long can the oil be in your machine without starting the machine, and with the machine starting every week?
For about half an hour.
So if your machine's just sitting for a long time, your oil you'll probably want to change every year if you're not using your machine very much. Oil doesn't super lose life if it's just sitting there, but it's more or less just a good peace of mind to know you have fresh oil running through your machine. If you're starting your machine every week for about 30 minutes, you can have the normal lifespan of that machine. So probably the same year. or 1,500 miles, about the time you'd want to change the oil. So if you have a serviceable air filter, not a paper filter in your machine, I personally like in some of the side-by-sides we have back here, they have a circular foam filter. So it's really hard to dip the whole thing in some chemical because it's really big. You need a big bowl. It's kind of annoying. So I like the Maxima air filter cleaner. It's a spray on. You just soak it in, put some gloves on because it's a pretty tough chemical. You'll want to soak the whole thing, let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then you'll run it under water and just rinse it out real good. Then you'll want to make sure you let it sit till it's dry. Another reason I like to have an extra filter with me is I can just put the clean filter in the machine and let the filter that I'm cleaning dry out for a few days. I'm not waiting on my filter some more. So you'll want to make sure it's dry. And then Maxima also has a spray on oil to coat, to treat that filter to help it grab the dust particles that it needs.
Do you recommend a pre-filter, like almost like a soft over the OEM type filter?
Do I recommend a pre-filter? If you know you're gonna be in a lot of dust, definitely. Yep. Anything to help that filter a little more is appreciated from the machine. If you know you're doing late season, a little wetter terrain, not a lot of dust in the air again, it's not a big deal.
I have a paper one, can I just blow it out with compressed air?
Yes. If you have a paper filter, can you just blow it out with compressed air? Yes, but only so many times. So about the third or fourth time, you're like, I can probably blow it out again. Just replace it. You're not going to get all the dust out of it, but you can definitely get more than just one service with it.
Sorry to ask you this question. So, a while back, there was a lot of problems getting parts, that pretty much caught up for you guys, or you still having issues?
Yeah, it's definitely caught up a lot. I don't know that we're quite there all the way, but it's a lot better than it has been, say, a year ago. Yep, we've been a lot better at keeping stuff in stock and having stuff available. What brands do we work on? We have Articat, Suzuki, KTM, Husqvarna, Gas. Yep. Yeah. Buy anything you want from us. You can bring tires in off the machine. We can replace tires for you.
So you guys use stock a lot for these machines, or you mostly come in, you order a machine, you get it in a month or two, or how is that
Supply chain for new machines. For side-by-sides, it's a little slow. We got a lot of four-wheelers and plenty of dirt bikes.
Everything's changed now, everything's starting to become more and more. Most manufacturers are way overproduced. So most dealers, if you look throughout the state, are way oversupplied with machinery. So the waiting for 6 months and all that's not really good.
Oh yeah, good one. Brake fluid. Easiest way to tell what your brake fluid is, it'll turn brown. It's normally close to clear. It has a yellowish tint to it when it's new, and it'll turn to a light brown, to a dark brown, to even black. When it starts changing to that brown color, you're due to bleed that out, replace it. Yeah, recommended warm up. Definitely let it warm up. If it's 40 degrees outside and you just get on it, you're definitely gonna be causing some damage to your engine. You can probably get away with it for a few years, but it's gonna hurt the overall longevity of your motor. As far as minutes, you're probably looking around 5 minutes, even 10 if it is as cold as 40 degrees outside and you're riding. If you have a temperature gauge on your unit, I like to have it at least 120 degrees before I'm riding. Running temperatures on machines range from 190 to 210 degrees. So you still have a ways from that 120 until you're all the way up to operating temperature. But that 120 is a good time to at least start moving.
So a lot of these machines, I almost get the impression they might have some type of a catalytic type converter. Is that true?
A catalytic converter.
An automotive type thing for better emissions? Or is there any, servicing of the exhaust system?
That I can think of, for the most part, the side-by-sides and ATVs do not have much as far as emissions go. You do have maybe a purge valve that'll dump a little more oxygen into your exhaust. But as far as servicing, the biggest thing to check, and with it as efficient as machines are these days, it's not something that you need to check all that often, but most machines will have a spark arrestor in them. If that gets any carbon buildup on it, you're gonna have issues there. I've only ever seen that issue with a 2-stroke, so not a huge concern there.
Anything else? Any questions?
Alrighty, thanks guys, thanks for your time.
Okay, guys, don't forget, Edge will sell you anything they have. Come in and support the Edge. Thank you, Randy, for everything you do. Okay, guys, we got a couple of things coming up. One, we got the Ride for Life this weekend. Anybody going on the Ride for Life, make sure you have a flag. Everybody, every machine needs to have a flag. They do have some available back here for purchase. So if you're going on the ride this weekend and don't have a flag, make sure you pick one up. Also, the weather forecast has changed. It looks like we might get rain. So with the rain, everybody might want to make sure that you've got your rain gear, any protective clothing that you might need. Everything might get muddy. As far as the ride goes, we will be meeting out at the Raceway in Grantsville. Registration will begin at 6 a.m. We will be pulling out of the parking lot on time. I suggest that you get there at 6 a.m. so that you can get in line to do your registration. Make sure that you get that all taken care of. At this point, we have the room raffle. I'm going to have Brett come up so we can take care of the room raffle, and then we're going to have the Ride for Life chairman come up and go over some other things. I also want to welcome all the new members, all the new people that are here tonight.
Funny initials. Looks like BZ, but it's really JR. Come see me after.
Okay.
Jason.
Congratulations, Jason. You want a hat? I wouldn't wear it this weekend.
You might need it.
Okay, do we have any new people here that have never been to the meeting before? Wonder if I could get you guys to stand up and introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you write.
My name's Nick. Some of you guys online looking for people to go riding with. You want to go with my brothers, but they're not always available. And started looking online for clubs or something. I ride, I think it's an 85 or an 86 Honda 300cc something, PRX I think. It's a Cortex. It's old, but it still runs. And putting regular gas in it and cleaning out the carburetor every couple of years.
Hi, I'm Larry, it's my wife Angie. We kind of wanted to go out and see trails. So we bought in big. We got a KRX 4-seater, toy hauler to haul around with. And now we need a group to teach us what to be doing. so we thought we'd come out and check you guys out. Thinking about joining, so looking pretty good so far.
Nice. We look forward to riding with you.
Dustin Dunlap, ride a Can-Am Defender.
Hi. Where you from? Salt Lake?
Yeah, Riverton.
Nice. Thanks.
Hey, whoa. Howdy. Belknap. Your wife does my son stuff? Is that her?
Welcome, everybody. Glad we get some new blood in here. Okay, so does anybody have any questions for me about the Ride for Life this weekend? All right, then I'm going to turn the time over to Laura.
Okay. All right. So, I know he said 6 o'clock. I would prefer 5:30, 5:45, 6 o'clock at the latest, because we're going to have a lot of stuff going on in the morning. With check-in, you're going to have a release form you need to take care of, and then you're going to get your packet, and then from there, I don't know if y'all know, but our prize trailer will be taking out anybody's luggage that needs it. If you want your luggage to go out and not get dirty, it'll be put in a trailer. There's going to be tags that you will put your name on. It's bright red. When you arrive at the Nugget, it will be right next to check-in so that you won't miss it. And then it needs to be back there Sunday morning, first thing, after we're done with the raffle. It will be loaded back in the trailer, and it'll be back out to Grantsville when we get back. With registration, we need to have everybody finished registration so that our people can get stuff cleaned up, so that we can start getting ready to go while we're introducing the family. We have Make-A-Wish there. We've got a couple different speakers going to be there. We're going to need everybody to be there as soon as possible so that we can get everything over and cleaned up so that we can start this ride no later than 8:30. We want everybody lined up and ready to go by 8 so we can be pulling out by 8:30. When we get to going, we will be escorted from Grantsville all the way out to, what is that? Goes up and over. Teddy Bear will jump up and over and drop down in, and then from that point on, our safety crew will be pretty much letting everybody know where to go nicely. And nicely, Bill. We have Jared Livingston from Big Pine. He's going to be our leader this year. He's going to be out there. Hopefully he knows where he's going and doesn't get everybody lost. Just kidding. But then what he's going to have to understand and listen to these guys when they start talking about the hazards on the trails. They're going to follow the signs, because there's been a lot of washouts. There's been a lot of
Growth.
A
lot of growth.
Yeah, a lot of growth. The sunflowers are very tall. I'm sure 6 feet tall, so you're going to have a hard time seeing. Please, nobody pull off the side. No pulling off into the vegetation at all. Because as much as it's out there, it's going to be dry, it's going to be hot, your machine's going to be hot. we could be in for some trouble if that happens. So, but yeah, everybody just be out there as early as possible. No later than 6. Please start coming 5:30, 5:45, so we can get started on time. So, good?
They can save themselves some time driving out in the morning.
Yeah.
We will have coffee and breakfast waiting for you
There
at
you
the
go.
ride. You don't need to stop at McDonald's on the way.
$4.
$4 for a burrito. They're sausage, egg, cheese, and potato. And the coffee's free.
No creamer that's alcohol related. Just kidding. No moonshine. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
How many people are signed up?
Oh, right now I have 152 people, but that's including my support and the search and rescue. So, what did we say last night? About 70 machines. Are you coming?
Yeah.
Sweet. Is this your first year? Okay. We'll get with you here in a minute. Cool. All right. Here you go. Any other questions? Cool.
Okay, guys, we're really looking forward to this year's ride. It should be a good one. We hope that you're all participating. And if you can't participate, you can get on Zeppi.com on our club page and donate. That way, all the proceeds from this go to the Utah chapter of the Make-A-Wish. All the money stays here in the state to help the kids in Utah.
All of the breakfast money goes to Make-A-Wish too.
Absolutely. We'll have fuel available. And we'll also have hot dogs and chips for lunch, all the water you can drink, and the soda. And don't forget your rain gear. It may rain. It may rain. Might be fun.
Right?
And hot tub. If you're
What?
lucky, it'll rain. Bathrooms.
There will be bathrooms. We will have porta potties being towed along with us to each stop.
And they are clean. They are always clean.
What's up? Yep, water and soda.
They're free.
Already said that. Everybody, please make sure that you're cleaning up your trash. If you see trash on the trail, please pick it up. Let's do our part to help clean this area up as we're going through. At this point, I will be out there Friday morning with multiple trips, hauling trailers back and forth. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody out there this weekend. Hopefully, and if anybody has any suggestions, anybody wants to volunteer to help with us next year, please see me or Bill. We'll definitely take your name and information. We're always looking for volunteers for this. It does take an army to run those. So thanks everybody. Let's give Randy a big hand for letting us come here for the meeting. Hey guys, don't forget there's a merchandise table at the back if you want to purchase anything before the ride. Thank you.